Welcome to my channel Truth Drama Stories. My name is Scarlett Hayes, and this story is about the night my parents threw me out when I was 13, and the day they came back pretending to love me after they heard I was rich. I didn't become strong because I wanted to. I became strong because I had no one left to protect me. Even now, when I hear a door slam too hard, my chest tightens. My hands go cold. And for a moment, I am not 31 anymore. I am 13 again. Standing in the rain, holding a trash bag with everything I owned inside it, and realizing my parents didn't want me anymore. It was October 17th. I remember the exact date because it was the same day my math teacher told me I had scored the highest in the class. She had smiled at me in a way no adult ever had before. "You're going to do something important someday, Evelyn," she said. I carried that paper home like it was treasure. I thought my parents would be proud. I was wrong. The house was quiet when I opened the front door. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made you feel like you weren't welcome inside your own life. My father, Richard Hayes, was sitting at the kitchen table. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at a stack of unpaid bills like they had personally betrayed him. My mother, Vanessa Hayes, stood at the sink. Her back was stiff. Her shoulders tense. I hesitated. "Hi," I said softly. Neither of them answered. I stepped closer. My heart was beating faster, but I didn't know why yet. "I got my math test back," I said. "I got the highest score." My father laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was sharp. Cold. "Do you think that matters?" he said. I froze. My mother turned around slowly. Her eyes looked tired. Not sad. Not angry. Just tired. "We need to talk," she said. Those 4 words changed my life forever. I stood there still holding my backpack. My father leaned back in his chair. "You're old enough to understand now," he said. "We can't afford you anymore." I didn't understand. I thought maybe he meant private school. Or new clothes. "I don't need anything," I said quickly. "I can use my old stuff." He shook his head. "That's not the point." My mother crossed her arms. "You eat. You use electricity. You cost money." Each word hit me harder than the last. I felt something inside my chest begin to crack. "I can help," I said. "I can get a job." "You're 13, my father snapped. The room went silent again. Then my mother said the words I will never forget. "You need to leave." I stared at her. I waited for her to say she was joking. She didn't. "I don't understand," I whispered. My father stood up suddenly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You understand perfectly," he said. "You've always understood too much." I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know why they were looking at me like I was a stranger. My mother walked past me toward the hallway closet. She pulled out a black trash bag and handed it to me. "Pack your things," she said. My hands didn't move. My brain refused to accept what was happening. "I'm your daughter," I said. Her face didn't change. "Not anymore." Those 3 words broke something inside me that would never fully heal. I walked to my room slowly. Each step felt unreal. My room was small. A single bed. A wooden desk. A lamp that flickered sometimes. It was the only place that had ever felt like mine. I opened my closet. My hands were shaking as I reached for my clothes. I didn't know what to take. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I wasn't allowed to stay. I packed my jeans. My sweaters. My math test paper. I don't know why I took that paper. Maybe because it was proof that I mattered somewhere. When I came back into the living room, my parents were standing near the front door. Waiting. Not crying. Not hesitating. Waiting. My father opened the door. Cold air rushed inside. "Go," he said. Didn't move. I looked at my mother. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Please," I whispered. She stayed silent. That silence hurt more than anything else. I stepped outside. The air was freezing. The sky was dark. It had started raining. I turned around once more. I thought maybe they would stop me. Maybe they would say they were sorry. Maybe they would remember they loved me. They didn't. My father closed the door. The sound echoed through my entire body. Click. Just like that, I was alone. I stood there for a long time. I don't know how long. Minutes. Hours. It all felt the same. Rain soaked through my clothes. My hair clung to my face. Cars passed by. Nobody stopped. Nobody noticed the girl standing alone with a trash bag. Eventually, my legs started moving. I walked without knowing where I was going. Each step felt heavier than the last. I was cold. I was scared. But more than anything, I felt empty. Like I didn't belong anywhere in the world anymore. After an hour, I reached the park near my school. The swings moved slightly in the wind. I sat down on a bench. My hands were numb. My teeth were shaking. And for the first time, I allowed myself to cry. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just quiet tears that slid down my face and disappeared into the rain. I didn't know what I had done wrong. I had been quiet. I had been obedient. I had tried to be perfect. But it still wasn't enough. That night, something inside me changed. I stopped being a child. And I became someone who understood that love could disappear without warning. Eventually, I fell asleep on that bench. Cold. Alone. Forgotten. I woke up to the sound of footsteps. For a moment, panic shot through my body. I thought it was my father. I thought he had come to yell at me again. But it wasn't him. It was a woman. She looked to be in her 40s. She wore a long gray coat. Her expression was calm but concerned. "Hey," she said gently. "Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I didn't trust adults anymore. She didn't come closer. She just stood there. "My name is Claire," she said. "What's yours?" I hesitated. "Evelyn," I whispered. She nodded. "That's a beautiful name." No one had ever said that before. Not my parents. Not anyone. She looked at the trash bag beside me. "Do you have somewhere to go?" I shook my head. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "You can come with me." I stared at her. I didn't know her. I didn't know if she was safe. But I knew one thing. I had nowhere else to go. And for the first time since the door had closed behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in hours. A small, fragile piece of hope. I stood up slowly. My legs were weak. My heart was racing. I didn't know it yet. But that moment was the beginning of everything. The beginning of the life I would build. The beginning of the strength I would discover. And the beginning of the day my parents would regret losing me. Because one day years later they would come back. Not because they loved me. Not because they missed me. But because they heard I was rich. And by then I was no longer the girl they had thrown away. I was someone they could never control again. The first time my phone rang with my father's name on the screen, I almost didn't recognize it. I was sitting at the long marble counter in my kitchen, staring at the city below. My coffee had gone cold. The sunlight felt sharp, almost invasive, like it was exposing parts of me I had spent years hiding. My phone vibrated again. Michael Hayes. My hand froze halfway to the cup. For a moment I couldn't breathe. He hadn't called me in 18 years. Not on my birthdays. Not when I graduated high school. Not when I slept on strangers' couches or worked double shifts just to afford food. Not once. And now suddenly his name was lighting up my screen like nothing had ever happened. I let it ring. It stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than the sound. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself he didn't matter. But my chest felt tight, and something old and fragile inside me had started to ache. Then a second later the phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call. It was a message. "Scarlett, this is your father. We need to talk." I stared at the words. Not "how are you?" Not "I'm sorry." Just "we need to talk." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Only disbelief. I set the phone down and walked to the window. The river below moved slowly, steady and calm. It didn't care about the past. It didn't remember anything. I wished I could be like that. But memories don't disappear. They wait. And mine had been waiting since the night I was 13 years old, standing barefoot on the cold pavement outside my parents' house. It was November. I remember because my breath came out in small white clouds, and my fingers were numb. I had been standing there for almost an hour. First, I thought they would open the door again. I thought my mother would come running outside, crying, telling me it was a mistake, that she didn't mean it. But the door never opened. The porch light stayed on. The curtains stayed closed. And I stayed outside. I remember sitting down on the concrete steps, pulling my thin jacket tighter around my body. My backpack was beside me, It had a few clothes, a toothbrush, and the $20 I had been saving for a school trip. That was everything I owned. I didn't cry at first. I think part of me was still in shock. Still waiting for someone to say, "This isn't real." But it was real. I knew it when the porch light suddenly turned off. They didn't even want to see me anymore. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not loudly, not violently, just quietly, like glass cracking under pressure. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, but I forced myself to walk. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. The streets were empty. The houses were dark. Everyone was inside, warm and safe, living lives that still made sense. I walked for hours. My feet hurt. My fingers burned from the cold. My stomach ached with hunger and fear. I didn't have a plan. I only had movement. Eventually, I ended up at a small park a few blocks away from my school. I sat on a bench and pulled my knees to my chest. That was where Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore found me. She was my English teacher. She had kind eyes and silver hair she always tied into a neat bun. She lived in a small house across from the park. She stopped when she saw me. "Scarlett." Her voice was soft but full of concern. I looked up at her and suddenly the tears came. Not gentle tears. Violent, uncontrollable sobs. She rushed to my side. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What happened?" I couldn't answer. The words were trapped inside my throat. She didn't push me. She just wrapped her arms around me and held me. That was the first time anyone had held me since my mother pushed me out the door. Mrs. Whitmore took me to her house that night. It was warm and smelled like tea and old books. She gave me a blanket and made me sit at her kitchen table. "You're safe. Here," she said gently. Safe. I hadn't realized how badly I needed to hear that word. She called my parents. I remember sitting there, listening to her side of the conversation. Her voice was calm at first, then confused, then angry. She hung up slowly. "They said," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "that you are no longer welcome in their home." Hearing it out loud felt different. Final. Permanent. I stared at the table. "I didn't do anything," I whispered. She reached across and took my hand. "I know," she said, and somehow I believed her. Mrs. Whitmore let me stay with her for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of borrowed safety. 3 weeks of pretending I still had something that resembled a normal life. But reality always finds you. One evening, she sat across from me with a folder in her hands. Her expression was serious. "Scarlett," she said gently, "I've been speaking with social services." The words made my stomach drop. "They want to place you in foster care." Foster care. The word felt cold and unfamiliar. I nodded slowly. I didn't argue. I didn't fight. Because deep down I already knew. No one was coming back for me. The foster system wasn't kind. Some homes were quiet and distant. Others were loud and unpredictable. I learned quickly how to stay invisible. How to be polite. How to be useful. How to never ask for too much. Because asking meant disappointment. And disappointment hurt more than silence. I focused on one thing. Survival. School became my escape. It was the only place where effort meant something. Where hard work turned into results instead of rejection. I stayed late. I studied harder than anyone else. Because I understood something most kids didn't. No one was going to save me. If I wanted a future, I had to build it myself. Years passed. Slowly. Painfully. I graduated high school at the top of my class. I worked 2 jobs while attending college. I slept 4 hours a night. I said yes to every opportunity, even when I was exhausted. Especially when I was exhausted. Because exhaustion meant progress. It meant I was moving forward. And forward was the only direction that mattered. I never called my parents. I never visited. I never even drove past that house. As far as I was concerned, they were strangers. Strangers who had once been responsible for my existence. Nothing more. By the time I was 27, everything had changed. I had built a career in financial consulting. I worked with companies that trusted me with millions of dollars. They trusted my judgment. They respected me. They valued me. Things my parents never had. I bought my apartment 2 years later. The day I got the keys, I stood alone in the empty living room. The space echoed with possibility. No one could take it away from me. No one could throw me out. For the first time in my life, I was truly safe. Or at least I thought I was. Until the calls started. First, it was just that one message. Then another. Scarlett, please respond. Then another. This is important. And finally a voicemail. I didn't listen to it right away. I let it sit there for hours like something dangerous. When I finally pressed play, his voice filled the room. Older. Weaker. But still his. Scarlett, he said. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But we heard about your success. We're proud of you. And we'd really like to see you. Proud. The word made my chest tighten. He wasn't proud when I was 13. He wasn't proud when I was alone. He was proud now. Now that I was successful. Now that I was worth something. I felt something shift inside me. Not sadness. Not pain. Clarity. They didn't come back because they loved me. They came back because I had become valuable. I walked to my office and opened the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a thick binder. Every document. Every record. Every detail of my life. Addresses. Dates. Names. Including theirs. I had kept everything. Not because I missed them. But because I never forgot. My fingers rested on the cover. For years it had just been a reminder. A record of where I came from. Now it felt like something else. Preparation. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Scarlett, please. We need your help. Help. The same people who had abandoned a 13-year-old girl in the cold were asking her for help. I closed the binder slowly. My reflection stared back at me from the dark computer screen. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't disposable. I had built something they couldn't destroy. But the past wasn't finished with me yet. And for the first time in 18 years, I was ready to face it. I didn't respond to his messages that day. Or the next. Or the day after that. I let them sit there unread, unanswered. But their presence lingered in my mind like a shadow that refused to leave. For 18 years they had lived their lives without me. They had slept peacefully, eaten dinner together, celebrated holidays and grown older. Without wondering where I was. Without caring if I was alive or dead. And now suddenly they needed me. I sat in my office late one night, staring at the city lights outside my window. My fingers rested on the binder in front of me. The binder wasn't emotional. It was precise, organized, controlled. Unlike my childhood. I opened it slowly. Inside were copies of everything. My foster care records. My school transcripts. My first apartment lease. Every job contract I had ever signed. Proof that I had built my life without them. But deeper inside the binder was another section. One I hadn't opened in years. Their section. Michael Hayes. Linda Hayes. My father and my mother. Even thinking those words felt strange now. Like they belonged to someone else's story. There was their last known address. Their employment history. Public records. And something else. Debt records. I paused. I didn't remember adding those. My heart began to beat faster. I flipped through the pages carefully. Credit defaults. Loan balances. Legal notices. They weren't just struggling. They were drowning. I leaned back in my chair slowly. So that was it. That was the real reason they had come back. Not love. Not regret. Money. I felt something cold settle inside my chest. Not anger. Not sadness. Just confirmation. Every instinct I had built over the years had been right. They hadn't changed. They had simply run out of options. My phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. Another message. This time it wasn't my father. It was my mother. Scarlett, please. I know we don't deserve it. But we need to talk. I'm sick. I stared at the screen. I remembered her face the night she slapped me. The anger in her eyes. The complete absence of hesitation. She hadn't looked sick then. She had looked certain. Certain that I was nothing. I set the phone down without replying. But something inside me had shifted. Not toward forgiveness. Toward closure. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't fully risen yet. The sky was pale and quiet. I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. For a long time I just looked at myself. I saw the faint scar near my eyebrow from when I fell off my bike at 8 years old. My father had laughed instead of helping me up. I saw the strength in my posture, the calm in my expression. I wasn't that little girl anymore. I was someone they couldn't control, someone they couldn't break. My phone rang again. I didn't hesitate this time. I answered. There was silence on the other end. Then his voice. Scarlett. It sounded smaller than I remembered. Yes, I said calmly. He exhaled sharply, like he had been holding his breath for years. I didn't think you'd answer. I almost didn't. The truth hung between us. He paused. I don't know where to start. I did. But I stayed silent. He cleared his throat. We heard about you. Your career. Your success. We're proud of you. The words felt empty. You said that already, I replied. He hesitated. I mean it. I walked slowly toward the window. The city was waking up. Cars moved along the streets. People stepped into their lives. Normal lives. You threw me out, I said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't break. It was steady. He didn't respond. So I continued. I was 13. I had nowhere to go. Silence. Then quietly, we thought it was for the best. I felt something inside me tighten. For who? I asked. He didn't answer. Because there was no answer. Only excuses. We made mistakes, he said finally. Mistakes. He said it like forgetting to pick up groceries, like abandoning a child with something small, something forgivable. I closed my eyes briefly. When did you decide I existed again? I asked. His breathing became heavier. That's not fair. I almost laughed. Not fair. The words felt surreal. I slept in parks, I said. I lived with strangers. I built my life from nothing. He said nothing, because he couldn't rewrite the past. We never stopped thinking about you, he said weakly. That was the first lie he had told directly, and we both knew it. What do you want? I asked. There it was. The question he had been avoiding. He hesitated. Then finally, we need help. Of course. Not I'm sorry. Not are you okay? We need help. I felt calm. Completely calm. With what? I asked. He exhaled slowly. We're in a difficult situation. I waited. Financially. There it was. The truth. Clean. Simple. Predictable. How much? I asked. He sounded surprised. About $200,000. $200,000. To him it was survival. To me it was less than 3 months of income. But that wasn't the point. The point was why. I walked back to my desk and placed my hand on the binder. The symbol of everything they had never given me. I'll meet you, I said. He went silent. You will? Yes. I could hear the relief in his breathing. When? He asked quickly. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Yes. Before I could change my mind. Before he could prepare a better lie. Okay, he said. Okay. We'll be there. I ended the call. The room felt different now. Heavier. More real. I opened the binder again and removed a single sheet of paper. Their current address. I stared at it for a long time. Tomorrow I would see them again. Not as their daughter, but as the person they had created by abandoning her. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Because this time they had no power over me. This time I was the one in control. The next day I stood across the street from their house and watched it in silence. It was smaller than I remembered. The paint was faded. The front yard was uneven, with patches of dead grass scattered between weeds. The porch light hung slightly crooked, like it hadn't been touched in years. This was the same house where my life had ended at 13, and where theirs had quietly fallen apart. I stayed inside my car for a moment longer, my hands resting on the steering wheel. My heartbeat was steady. My breathing was calm. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for truth. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house. Each step felt deliberate, controlled. I wasn't the scared little girl who had stood here barefoot, begging to be let back inside. I was someone else now, someone they didn't know. I knocked on the door. There was movement inside. Slow, hesitant footsteps approached. Then the door opened. My father stood there. Michael Hayes. He looked older. much older than 31 years should have allowed. His hair was mostly gray now. His shoulders were slouched like life had slowly pressed him downward. His eyes met mine. For a moment neither of us spoke. He stared at me like he was trying to recognize something familiar. "Scarlett," he whispered. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. This was the man who had watched me leave and done nothing. This was the man who had chosen silence over his daughter. Behind him I saw my mother, Linda Hayes. She looked thinner, frilier. Her face had deep lines I didn't remember. But her eyes were the same. Careful. Measuring. She stepped forward slowly. "You came," she said softly. I nodded once. "Yes." They stepped aside to let me in. I walked into the house. It smelled different. Older. Staler. But the structure was the same. The same walls. The same hallway. The same living room where I had once sat as a child, believing this place was safe. We sat across from each other. No one spoke at first. They were waiting. Waiting for kindness. Waiting for weakness. Waiting for the version of me they had known. But she didn't exist anymore. My father cleared his throat. "You look successful." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. "Yes," I said calmly. My mother leaned forward slightly. "We're so proud of you." The words fell flat. I reached into my bag and placed the binder on the table. They both looked at it, confused. "This," I said calmly, "is my life." I opened it slowly. Every page represented something they had missed. Every achievement. Every struggle. Every moment they hadn't been there. "I built everything myself," I said. They stayed silent. I turned a few pages. "You weren't there when I graduated." Another page. "You weren't there when I got my first job." Another page. "You weren't there when I bought my first home." My mother looked down. My father said nothing, because there was nothing they could say. I closed the binder. The sound echoed softly in the room. "You asked for $200,000, I said. My father shifted uncomfortably. "Yes." He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just waited. I studied his face carefully. I searched for guilt, for regret, for anything that resembled love. But all I saw was need. And that was when I understood something clearly. They hadn't come back for me. They had come back for what I had become, not who I was. I reached into my bag again and pulled out an envelope. I placed it on the table. My father stared at it. My mother's eyes widened slightly. "There's money in there," I said calmly. My father's face filled with relief. "Scarlett, thank you." He reached for it quickly, but I placed my hand on top of it. He froze. "There's something else," I said. He looked at me, confused. "This is the last thing you will ever receive from me." The words settled heavily between us. My mother's expression changed. "What do you mean?" I looked directly at her. "I mean, this is goodbye." Silence filled the room. My father frowned. "You don't mean that." "I do." My voice didn't shake. It didn't break. It was calm, certain. "You made your choice 18 years ago," I said. "This is mine." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "Scarlett, please. Please." The same word she hadn't used when I begged her not to push me out the door. "I survived without you," I said quietly. The truth was simple, clear, final. I don't need you now. My father's relief had disappeared. Now there was something else. Fear. Not of losing a daughter, but of losing access. I removed my hand from the envelope. He grabbed it immediately. I stood up. Neither of them moved. Neither of them stopped me, because deep down they knew. They had lost me a long time ago. I walked to the door slowly. I paused for just a second, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to remember how it felt, to leave on my own terms. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air felt fresh, light, free. For 18 years, that house had existed in my memory as a place of pain. But now it was just a building. Nothing more. Nothing less. I walked to my car and got inside. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. As I drove away, I realized something important. Closure doesn't come from revenge. It comes from understanding your worth. They had thrown me away when I was 13 because they believed I was nothing. But they were wrong. I had always been something. They just couldn't see it. And now they never would again. I returned to my apartment and stood by the window, watching the city below. The same city that had witnessed my struggle. The same city that had witnessed my rise. But this time there was no weight on my chest. No unfinished chapter. No unanswered questions. Only peace. Because the little girl they abandoned had survived. And the woman she became had finally let them go. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share truth drama stories with your friends. Because sometimes the people who break you are the same people who teach you how strong you really are. And sometimes the greatest revenge is simply living a life they never believed you could achieve.